Very honored to have our three filmmakers here on Nguyen. We have Helen Lesmana and Emily Vu. So I wanted to introduce them first of all, and really also thank Viet Lead as the co-producer for this film series. And Anh, if you can tell us more about Viet Lead as well, and what type of work that they do, as we saw in the film, that would be wonderful. But yeah, I wanted to open it up and have you introduce yourselves. I was really honored to be able to interview you for a little bit virtually already, but if you can introduce yourselves to the audience, that would be great.
Hi everyone, Nguyen, she, her, hers. First of all, you were not supposed to see the last part. Sorry, some tech issues. I'm a Vietnamese American filmmaker. I do both narratives and documentaries. I just graduated from AFI about a month ago. So I love stories that really center Southeast Asian communities, specifically women and girls, and our resilience and power. And I made Taking Root with Viet Lead. They were a producer. The co-director of Viet Lead, Lan, who you saw, she did this research. She did all the research to see like what happened to us after the war in Philadelphia, and that inspired Taking Root to take place. And so Viet Lead is a really amazing social justice organization in Philadelphia. They work with youth. They work on self-determination, civic engagement. Just really, really incredible organizing to help heal our communities.
Hi everyone, I'm Helen. I'm the director of Peace Offering. I made it as my senior thesis project in Cal State Long Beach. I was an animation major, and for Peace Offering, it's been a story that I really wanted to tell ever since I was, even before I decided to major in animation. I wanted to kind of highlight more about the mental health, since mental health is very stigmatized in some Asian communities still, so I kind of want to create a story that sort of highlights the importance of talking about mental health, and also about bringing up generational trauma and how it's something that should not be left in the dark, but something that should be talked about, and should be discussed as a means to sort of be better, and to sort of, just to communicate and to, just be better in the next generation, and how we can heal from that. And is it working? No. Is it working? Oh, is it working? Oh, sorry. Hi, I'm Emily Vu. I worked as the co-designer and background artist for Helen's film Peace Offering. And as Vietnamese American, I really appreciated working on a film that touched upon issues that happen within Southeast Asian homes. And yeah, it was an incredible opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I'm really excited that these two films were particularly paired together, because I see a lot of similarities and parallels. And a lot of the themes that you mentioned in your films, intergenerational trauma, right? Peace Offering is about this healing process through food and offerings. And there's also very much a social justice background. And I wanted to get more of an idea about what inspired you to make these films, and why using animation in particular, right, as a vehicle to portray and convey these stories.
So why I felt inspired? I think as obviously like a Vietnamese, a daughter of refugees, immigrants, I think a lot of people resonate with this, that we feel really called to honor the sacrifices that our parents did for us. And I felt very compelled at a very young age. I actually made documentaries when I was 16. And I made one about my parents, a journey after the war. And so I'm 33 now, I'm still making these films. So it's like really interesting to see. I feel like maybe, well, I know I'm trying to also heal within myself what my parents went through, so intergenerational trauma. I'm trying to honor what they went through, and also try and find healing for us. And I think that our stories are so important, and it needs to be affirmed. they need to be seen, they need to be heard, and it was really important for me to make this doc with Viet lead with community. As you can see, like a lot of community folks are involved in this. And it's also for us to be portrayed with dignity. And it's like, I think it's really important as a storyteller for me to tell the truth of what we went through, like the struggle, and also like our triumph and our resilience and our power and our joy. You can see some of the joy, even though it was really painful. So that's what inspires me to tell these stories. And I wanted to use animation illustration. We actually work with 2 Viet illustrators who never did film before, because I wanted to, again, portray us with dignity, and I didn't want to put violence, specifically like, you know, the GI soldiers or seeing that kind of violence that was done to our communities. But to show archival was really important to the journey, but also illustration to kind of, yeah, portray that experience in a different way.
Yeah, and for me, what inspired me to make Peace Offering is just highlighting mental health and also generational trauma that happens more at home, and how, you know, how it's about like a personal story, how it's based off of my mom and my grandma actually, and how just how it kind of passes down, like the pain and the behaviors that we learn from our parents just kind of pass down from one generation to another, and sometimes we don't really know why, and we don't know why it's happening or why is it this way. We don't really know specifically how like abuse and trauma just causes brokenness and fracture in family, but I think opening up a dialogue and just kind of communicating and talking about it with your family or your parents is not a bad thing. I feel like it's part of the healing process, not only for maybe for the younger generation or the kids, but it's also for like the parents, and just I think it's still like mental health and all that is still deemed a bad thing, or like it's something that we don't really talk about. And I'm actually an international student from Indonesia, so I've lived 18 years in Indonesia, and our culture is still very much rooted in don't talk about mental health. You know, if you're depressed, you're crazy, and that's not true. Like the more that we kind of, the more that we sort of adopt that way of thinking, it's not going to get better. Nothing is going to get better, and I think that's what I strongly believe in, and that's why I really, really wanted to make this film. And you know, a lot of my family members are still kind of like, oh, you know, like, oh, what's your film so sad? But I feel like I feel so much joy that a lot of people are able to relate to this. To my film, and I chose animation because I think with animation you can have a lot of control in a lot more things, like the colors, the lighting. You're not really constricted to reality and how like real life or like the lighting, or like, you know, you don't have to wait for a specific time of the day to shoot for a certain effect or something like that, which could be a challenge, but also an opportunity for animation. And I think, you know, I think that's the power of animation, and animation is not only for kids, but it is a different way of communicating to like a broader audience, for sure.
And going off of what Helen said with choosing the media of animation, I believe one creative decision I really liked Helen choosing was to have like the characters be like faceless or like without eyes, and I really like that because you can kind of like self-insert yourself into that situation, and like it helps you kind of see yourself in that, like even though it's like Helen's specific situation, like you can kind of see yourself in that. And
Thank you so much. It's really interesting also how you talked about there's a lot of heavy topics, right, that you cover in your films, and finding the balance between that and the joy and the resilience and all the other stuff that occurs in the spectrum, right, of human living and suffering and so forth. what did you learn in making these films about your own families and the struggles that they went through and how they were able to get through that? And also the other part of my question is, what did you learn about community building? Because there's a lot about community building in these two films as well.
Yes, you said what I learned from. Okay, yeah.
Yourself and your family.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So I actually did a lot of reflection before like deciding for the ending for this film, because I know I wanted to do this film, but what kind of ending do I want to convey? And so I chose a more open ending just because family, you know, like generational trauma is a very complicated issue. It's not something that you can solve within one generation. I think when I'm developing the story, I sort of talked a lot to my other Asian American friends who has experienced similar issues or similar experiences growing up with me, and we kind of we didn't find a solution, of course, but we sort of concluded that it gets better with generation. But with each generation, you kind of have to do the work to acknowledge the pain and the brokenness that exist. And so that is something that I learned, and just I think a hard lesson that I need to learn is that like I might not be able to make it right, but I think I still have to try to acknowledge it and try to learn from my parents and their parents before to make it right. And that's okay, and that's how it works, and that still means something.
I feel that working on this film kind of helped me self-reflect and see like, oh, my parents, like, yeah, they don't really choose to apologize up front. They do kind of apologize through roundabout means, like such as giving fruit or like food instead of like an actual apology. And that kind of makes me more conscious, like maybe one day when I have children, I do want to be a lot more like upfront with how I like apologize and speak with my children. And in terms of community, I really enjoyed sharing this film with my friends and my fellow Vietnamese American community, because they really seemed to like relate, and it was like really nice to like see the reactions to it for sure.
I learned, well, my family had a very different journey. My family, my dad, well, it's like a very long story, but basically we actually resettled in France. So my family's journey was a bit different. But I think what I learned from the documentary is it's important to talk about the war in Vietnam as the war in Vietnam, American war in Vietnam, and it didn't just impact Vietnamese folks, it impacted Laotians, Cambodians, Mon, Montagnards, and to see the impact it had on the region, Southeast Asia as a whole, and the impact of America being involved in imperialism. I learned that we are deserving of healing. I think our parents' generations, I had a really good friend tell me that, Maheen Kaleem, she's amazing, philanthropist and activist, and she said that you made this documentary because our parents can't see like what happened to them. And there's something so powerful about that, because as you can see, like a lot of themes of community is very intergenerational. Like you had Debbie, older, like 20s, helping out younger youth, organizing, and when school attacks happened, there was like older Asian women, American women that supported the youth. And I think there's like, there's such importance of like caring for each other. And I think sometimes we forget that how that care has such a big impact. And if we organize together, we take care of each other, like what powerful things can come out of that. So I think it was a reminder of that. And yeah, the power of community. Like we had Viet Lead student interviewers be a part of it. A lot of it was my first time on set. It's the first thing I actually ever directed really officially. And so there's like a lot of community folks involved, and there was multiple people's first time on set. So I learned the power of community and making something that we really truly care about.
Yeah, I really appreciated just seeing the historical analysis and looking at the structural, systemic, right, racism and violence that occurred in these communities, and how that help to build solidarity. What were some challenges that you encountered in getting stories told, and was it hard to interview some of these subjects and your parents, your own family members, to get those stories? Because I often hear from my own students, right? Oh, my parents never talk about it, or it comes out in little ways here and there. So what were some maybe tips that you learned, or perhaps things that you felt really helped to bring out these stories and empower people to tell from their own voices, their own stories?
It's definitely relationships. Viet Lead had the relationships of these 15 interviewees. And without that, I don't think we would have gotten what we got. Of course, there was one person who was anonymous, and actually I won't disclose that. But basically, it took him a while to want to tell his story, and he was able to. And I think in the end, it was just because Viet Lead had developed these relationships for like 15, 20 years, and everybody wanted to talk, like they were excited to talk about their experiences, which is kind of rare in these situations, but they felt ready.
Yeah, that trust building is so key. And I think highlighting these community organizations and community leaders that you worked with, right, and how they've been working in this for many, many years, and it wasn't just you coming in as a filmmaker and recording their stories, but it really did a wonderful job of documenting that history, that long history.
Yeah, I actually didn't interview my family or anything like that. So all the information, background information, I quote unquote knew about my family, or the things that happened with my mom or grandma is it's just when you're in a family gathering, right, and then you sit in a round table and you're eating together, and then you kind of hear them retell stories about their parents or something like that. Yeah, so I didn't really interview them. I just kind of splice things up together. I'm like, oh, I think this is what happened. So actually me, my sister, and my cousin, since, again, my family, I know for sure that there's a lot of, there's been abuse happened in my mom's side of family, and but they never really talked about it. And I think it's because it's either too painful to talk about, or they just don't really want to pass this down on to their children, which is valid. But me, my sister, and my cousin, we were like, what's all this? What's all this drama? We need to uncover this. And so, it's sometimes my aunt, she shares bits and pieces. She never shares the whole thing, but she shares bits and pieces. And me and my sister, my cousin, we would get together and we would just kind of splice the story up and try to figure out what sort of happened. And so I think the story is sort of fictional, sort of based off of real life, but I think it's about I think that in the heart of it is, I think, what happened. It's about abuse and how that is reflected towards us, my sister and my cousin, at the end of the day. So yeah, I didn't really introduce my mom or anything like that, because it's still a sore subject, and I think even now, I don't think she would tell it to even my dad or the people closest to her. I don't think they even talked about it. Her and her mom, they didn't really talk about it. Her and her sister, they didn't really talk about it. So yeah, not to take it upon myself to kind of spill the whole family drama, but yeah, that's why I don't want to really call this film as based off of a true story. So it's sort of yeah.
And I also didn't interview anyone, especially for this film, but when I brought up the topic of parents giving sliced fruit to their children for apologies, a lot of my friends are oh, they completely understood the moment I brought it up. And just seeing people post those things on TikTok and Facebook pages and everything about that kind of being a shared unified experience, it felt like a very right subject to touch upon for Helen's film.
Yeah, I definitely felt the emotional connection throughout both films, and I think you both, all of you did a wonderful job of really connecting on that human level, right? These are universal themes, so thank you for doing that. All right, I'm going to open up questions to the audience now, and
Right over there.
Hello, Anmi, Helen, and Emily. My name is Nina. I'm from the California Healthy Nail Salon Collaborative. First off, I just wanted to personally thank Wanmi for your individual effort in providing COVID-19 funding and resources to the collaborative during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. My question is, it's the same question for both of you, and I'm going to frame it, based on the works that you individually created. So in taking root on me, something that really spoke out to me was when I heard one of the interviewees saying that violence is sometimes the human response to dehumanization. And in both films, I see that there are intractable and inexcusable acts of violence, but also violence as a form of protest. I wanted to ask, what are the next steps in you using resistance and joy in your next projects on you?
Well, I'm really excited that we're using the documentary. Actually, we're doing a national tour across the U.S. We're using it to, we're teaming up with Southeast Asian Freedom Network and Viet Lead. And essentially what we're doing is helping organize Southeast Asian organizations in 10 different cities to use the doc to educate our narrative and what happened to us and our by us, for us, but also to help mobilize folks to pass a campaign called SEER. I forget what it stands for, but for SEER, basically for the U.S. to take accountability for Agent Orange and unexplained ordinance in Southeast Asia, and also to end the deportation of Southeast Asians. And so in June, for the 50th anniversary of the war, we're gonna go to DC. We're gonna organize a march. But I think this doc is goes beyond being a film, which is really cool as a filmmaker. It doesn't just end. I have a whole community behind it, using it for education. So that's basically the hope and what we're trying to do in next year.
Just need a second question.
Oh, okay.
This one is going to be for Helen and Emily. That short was very impactful, and I really appreciated how you both accomplished a lot of dialogue with so few words in the film, as well as unshared scenes. So I found myself filling in intentional gaps that you left in the short. Regarding what I'm hearing about how you both have foraged and spliced bits of information from what you've seen online through shared collective experiences. I wanted to know, what are your next steps in creating projects that rely on this type of foraging for information and taking, not exactly like you said, true events, but it's events that happen to a lot of people, who you know in the community and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah, of course. That's a really great question. Yeah, I think a lot of my stories tend to be some things that I feel strongly about, and also just and you mentioned foraging for information, and being a Gen Z, I'm always on TikTok, and I know, yeah, but I do, here and there, I do find a really, really interesting point, really interesting issues, or maybe discussions that they brought up. Maybe it's hidden in the form of satire or memes or something like that, but regardless, it's a really interesting point. And I think I will, my projects and what I've learned from my my art practices as an artist is that I really like to create art that especially when it comes to animation, right? It's such a tedious process. It takes such a long time, takes such a big team and a lot of effort. And so with that, it usually when it comes from like the heart or something that I really believed in, it's a great motivation, because animation, again, it's a lot of commitment, takes a lot of team, and if you have a team and a teammate that believes in what you're saying and believes in you, and they also want to tell the story, like Emily, you basically find yourself in like a really great spot where like, yes, I can do this, like we can do this, we can convey our message out there into the world, and we're going to tell what we think about this specific like message or topic into the world. And so yeah, that's what ended up happening with Peace Offering, is that I found like a lot of great like collaborators, animators who believed like not only in me but also in the content of the story, and also they were able to share their experiences as well.
Also, thank you for the great question. This past summer, I recently went to Vietnam, and there was a lot of ideas for like short films that kind of came to mind, especially in regards to food for me. I have like a very interesting relationship with Vietnamese food, in my opinion. Like my mom has always tried to cook them for me, and I'm always like, oh, I should learn the recipes from her, but like I never get the chance. So going to Vietnam, like I'm like really like realizing like how much I want to like carry on this culture, especially to my children in the future. But also for me, I'm also a bit of a picky eater, which kind of sucks. So there's a lot of Vietnamese food that I'm a little bit sensitive to textures with, and that kind of makes me want to explore like if there are other like Vietnamese Americans that kind of experience the same thing I did. There's like a lot of foods that I want to try, but like I'm a little bit scared because like there's a lot of seafood. I'm not really into seafood, but like I want to see like if there are other people who experience the same feelings I did when I was in Vietnam.
Really important question. Durian, yes or no?
Absolutely.
It's a no for me, I'm sorry.
All right. Are there any other questions from the audience?
Hello, my name is Nguyen. I have two questions, but I guess the first question is like a two-part question, and this question is going to be for Ani, and I apologize in advance if I'm going to stir up the pot. Let's see. Okay. So one thing I saw during the documentary was that it was a big blame on the U.S. and Vietnam for the root cause of us having the refugee crisis and immigrating to the U.S. and diaspora. I love that you guys are doing this project and what Viet is doing, and you guys are holding the U.S. government accountable for 18 Orange and the bombs dropped. But and we are spending billions of dollars to fix our mistakes as Americans. Do you think it's a little damaging for those that fought for freedom in Vietnam and against communism? And I have a follow-on question after that.
Do I find it harming what?
Is it a little damaging to those that like veterans or anyone that fought as allies of South Vietnam to, yeah, you know, like because we lost the war, and yeah, like I guess a little bit of the narrative, like we're holding ourselves accountable, and versus like being lost to the communist government and stuff.
Okay. Well, I feel like obviously there's a lot of complexities, right? Of like, there's a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different experiences with the war. So I think it's important to understand both sides. And like my doc says, right? Like when we were resettled in Philly, we were pit against each other, and I would really want to not indulge in a narrative that pits Vietnamese folks against each other. So do I feel like it's damaging to have this narrative out? Is that what you're, can you just repeat your question? I'm sorry, I want to make sure I'm answering it.
I guess like, is it a little damaging to like the veterans that fought, like who are going through PTSD, who like, because we lost South Vietnam and everything, and you know, of course there's racism and issues in America,
Yeah.
but like those that were actually there for the good cause to like prevent prevent the fall of Saigon. And I guess if they were to see something like this, and then through all our failures, and to say that we were not supposed to be there, versus when some people that were trying to be there to help, but then of course we lost.
And are you specifically talking about American soldiers, or are you speaking about?
I think for anyone that lives in the South, because the documentary I saw at the earlier show screening was they just lost their home, and then Vietnamese that fled Vietnam because they lost their home and fleeing from communism and stuff.
Yeah, okay. I feel like it's important to have multiple narratives, right, of both sides, and I don't think it's harming to specifically veterans, because I think a lot of people suffered, right? They suffered as well, but there's also a lot of civilians that suffered on both sides, and so I think it's important to also emphasize that perspective.
So to follow on question. Okay. The last question is going to be good. Okay, fine. Sorry. Follow-on question. I guess we're holding the U.S. accountable, but do you think is Viet Lead or communities in America also holding the Vietnamese government in Vietnam accountable for human rights and stuff? Or is that too bad of a question?
I mean, I don't work specifically with community organizations, so I can't really answer that.
Maybe one final very quick question. That's it. Right up there.
I don't know if I have a question. I want to join the dialogue, if that's okay, because I want to address what you asked. And I think the point in the film that I noticed was this narrative of pitting one group against each other and not recognizing the structure and the system. And so that structure and system is war, right? Imperialism, colonialism, and neocolonialism. And so when we ask the question, does a narrative like in this film cause harm or damage, we're playing into that. And so for me, it's about like, how can we have a conversation of reconciliation and understanding? And it's okay to express that, our first generation who fought in the war, my own father who was a pilot in the war, and, and how we can have that conversation about, what harms that experience, and then how does that pass on to the next generation, which is what these young women's animation is about. I think that's more important of a conversation to bring up than a question about, does it cause harm? We already know it's harmed everyone. And so my encouragement to your questioning of this is to reconsider how you would reframe your curiosity about those experiences and how we come together, just like in the film these communities have done, instead of continuing to ask who's harming who. So that's how I would. Thank you. I think these questions highlight, right, the importance of multiple stories and narratives, like Nguyen was saying. And I think having space, right, to discuss about these issues that are, again, not in the history books, right? We don't learn about these things. And movies, I think film, these particular films are so powerful because they allow for this storytelling, right? For different narratives and different ways of talking about things. Because it's very traumatic. All of these stories are very traumatic to retell and to relive, right? And so I think having spaces like this, it's incredibly powerful. So I really thank you, especially as young women. I remember being in my teens and picking up a camera and wanting to make films too. And I think, kudos to you for coming back to it and being an AFI fellow director. That's awesome, right? And congratulations. And I'm so excited to hear about your next projects. And if you have any other comments or anything you want to share, anything coming up that you're working on, or any last words you want to share with the audience?
Sure. Yeah, I just want to also name that sometimes we play into this oppression Olympics. And I think it's important to remember that we're all deserving to heal, we're all deserving to have our experiences, and we deserve to see each other as well. So I just want to emphasize that before moving on to my next project. I'm really excited. I have my AFI thesis film, Little Bird. It's coming out AFI Fest on 25th, so please look up if you want to come. It's free tickets, and it's actually inspired by the documentary of specifically the rent strike and how people were resettled in Philly, but it's based in LA. So I'm very excited for folks to see it in 2 weeks.
And I guess I just want to thank Viet Film Fest for including my film, Peace Offering, in the big screens. It's always such like a dream come true to see like the piece of work that I've been working on for like a year just come to the big screens, and just being able to be here with Emily. That's such it can be better. So yeah, thank you so much for giving my film platforms and, you know, Asian voices and experiences platforms to connect and build a community and, you know, make great pieces of art.
And I'd like to thank our interviewer for asking like really great questions and like allowing us the space to talk about it. I'm really glad that we got to have our film with Nguyen. It was like such an emotional and like very important piece that I'm like really glad we got to be together for it. And I'm of course like grateful to be with Helen here. Yes, thank you.
And thank you to all of you for coming and attending and supporting Viet Film Fest. Donate to VAALA, and please enjoy the rest of the film online as well as in person this weekend. Thank you, everyone.